I do feel like some mock drafts are very much like kinks. Now, of all the mock drafts that you consume on a given day, right, how much of them are literally fan fiction? And how much of them actually have some insight as to how maybe that top 5, that top 10 is going to play out?
There's a lot of fan fiction and a lot of like head canon, I guess is a good term. You know, like, oh, this makes sense in my mind. And I love that multiverse that I'm going down, right here. Right. But there are some of the guys that are in the know, the Daniel Jeremiahs of the world, Dane Brugler at The Athletic, that they kind of mix and mash, maybe some insight that they have and try to kind of go, I don't know, but I could see this when they actually might know a little something. So it depends on, it depends on your source, the source of the water for these mock drafts. Some of them are just a hose spraying you down and just making you feel, hot and bothered after a little bit of time. But some do have some make you eat your vegetables.
Honestly, that's how I feel about some Mandalorian speculation when I read the future episodes. Now, here's the thing. Nate Tice joining us from The Athletic. What I find interesting is, for our purposes in the Carolina Panthers, we have our opinions who we think the Carolina Panthers should take. And the mock drafts have kind of gone from what's going to be CJ Stroud to all of a sudden this week it's all Bryce Young. And this is when we get into the smokescreen portion of the programming ahead of the draft. And you just mentioned a lot of those names. I think everybody in our audience recognizes and respects those guys. But sometimes I wonder if they realize they're getting used to kind of get the positioning of another team to go, well, wait a minute. They're going to take this guy? I need to make a move to make this happen. It happens, right?
Absolutely happens. We're in the silly season. And I think that happens, information is, valuable, it's worth its weight in gold. Actually, that doesn't make sense because information doesn't have weight, but just go with the metaphor here. But it is really just, that is the give and take of this part of the season. And it's funny for me is that even after the Panthers made the trade up to number 1 was right away, they go, doesn't mean we're staying at number 1. It's like, oh, come on, guys.
Right.
Like
we control the draft. That's what they say.
Yeah, exactly. And so there is that give and take is you have to sift through the information, who's giving the information, who is also, they are also part of the game as well. But that is something that there's a lot of smoke screens out there. Some are very, very real and some are just that, smoke screens. So, but that is something that you always have to take into account, but it is still fun to speculate no matter what the information that you're given. It's still fun to speculate on.
Nate Tice from The Athletic joining us here on the Heister Automotive Group Hotline. That's Joe Ovies. I'm Joe Giglio. All right, Nate, I'm Nicole Tepper. He's David Tepper. I want you to first give us the case for why we should take Bryce Young, and then I want you to give us the case for why we would take CJ Stroud with this number 1 pick.
First and foremost, Bryce Young is a playmaker. I mean, I don't agree with the Steph Curry comparison some people have made because they're talking about just sleight of size. But as far as willing to operate from the pocket, he handles stuff mentally. Bill O'Brien put some stuff on his plate as far as pre-snap, which is always translates to the next level. It only gets harder at the next level mentally as far as and physically. Accurate, can throw off platform, change arm angles, can make his teammates truly better. Even though he went to Alabama, this is probably the least amount of talent I've seen on an Alabama offense the past 2 seasons. He truly carried those offenses to making plays and creating wins.
Giglio is making a face. He's not so sure.
The 21 season?
21 season, 22 season. Watch those offensive lines. It was like a jailbreak screen.
22
every single play.
Yeah, I said Alabama was in trouble when they added a Georgia Tech transfer and a Louisville transfer. So this is me.
I mean, remember a few years ago, did they get a receiver from Oregon State? And it was like, really, you have to go to Oregon State to get a guy? Yeah. But that's really what it is. He carried that team. The receiving talent, the guys looked, inexperienced, a lot of wrong routes, a lot of guys falling down, and he made the most of it. They had a tight end that some people are high on, but I can understand why Bryce Young didn't really want to target him too many times when he was going through his stuff. And as far as weaknesses, of course, there's the size stuff, which is, first and foremost, is going to be on everyone's, tip of their tongue when they talk about him. My historical comparison, I'm actually doing a video on Bryce Young today, is Doug Flutie, because he is such an outlier as far as physically. He is, and you just have to state that. He does a lot to mitigate that mentally. He's willing to throw over the middle, which is a big deal when you're talking about a shorter guy. Because if you look at guys like Kyler, even Russell Wilson, Baker, Mayfield, Baker Mayfield's not the tallest guy in the world. They struggle to throw over the middle of the field. They just can't see guys. He does everything he can to find those avenues to operate over the middle. Having said all that, sometimes I feel like he predetermines things and will, go to scramble and creation mode, doesn't really trust the concept or trust his receivers, which is fine at the college level. But there's sometimes where you want to, save yourself some shots, man.
Sure.
It's only gonna get harder at the NFL level. And I would say the other kind of weakness is that his arm strength isn't overwhelming. It is more of I would say above average on the grading scale for scouting terms, which is fine. It's adequate for the NFL level, but it is not overwhelming. So there's not a lot of room for error. That's the thing. He does a lot to problem solve, but sometimes he creates his own problems when he goes into creation mode.
Nate Tice joining us here, The Athletic on the Heister Automotive Group Hotline alongside Joe Giglio. I'm Joe Ovies. You just said the word outlier when it comes to Bryce Young. He's the exception to what we're dealing with. And you brought up names like we're very familiar with Russell Wilson, given his time at NC State. Although I know you know too with Wisconsin and everything else, so we get it
covered.
We got it all covered. But Russell was like listed at 6. I'm 5'10". He was like my height. Like stop it.
Yeah.
But he was thick, and that's I guess where the frame question comes into Bryce Young. And if I have the number 1 pick in the draft and I'm Frank Reich, do I really want to take the flyer on the outlier? Or would I rather go with something that is more known, I guess, which would be in the case of CJ Stroud, who I don't think we've actually seen be able to use his athletic abilities. We saw it briefly in the game against Georgia, but I don't think he needed to use it. It doesn't mean he doesn't have it. He just hasn't necessarily used it. I mean, I'm high on CJ Stroud. Where do you see it?
Yeah, I would not be betting on the size outlier. What you're bringing up with the weight stuff is the factoid I've kind of came across was the last quarterback to be under 200 pounds actual playing weight, right? Phony combine weight. Was to go into first round under 200 pounds was Jim McMahon in 1983, I believe it was. That's
not
crazy.
Johnny Manziel.
Nope, Manziel was over 200. It was Jim McMahon. The last one to go in the first 3 rounds was Pat White in 2009 or 2008, whatever year that was, from West Virginia.
Okay, not who you want to be with.
So, no.
Yes, this is a historical outlier. Yes, exactly. I did a study a few years ago, and this was about Zach Wilson, because I do have size concerns always when a guy's under 210, much less 200. And really, the only 3 historical good players that were under 210 was Lamar Jackson, Mike Vick, 2 of the greatest athletes to ever play the quarterback position, and Mark Bulger out of nowhere was the other one. So it is
that if you gave me 10 chances to get the next guy, I would have come up with Mark Bulger.
I know. When I did the study, I cracked up. I was like, oh, I didn't expect to see him. And Mark Bulger was a 6th-round pick. He was not a day 1 pick or even day 2. And when you look at these guys, I look at Stroud. Stroud has a lot of that more traditional type where he's accurate. He operates from the pocket. I like his pocket movement, even if sometimes he's gotten better at it. And he has, he's playing with 2 potential first round offensive linemen, a fantastic receiving group. Marvin Harrison Jr. is probably going to go to the top 5 next year, on top of Jackson Smith and Jigba, who will go in the first round this year. And then last year he had Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. So he does have a lot more room for error than all these other top quarterbacks. But having said that, he knows how to layer throws. He's willing to attack all 3 levels. I'm a big fan of Stroud. He is truly my QB1 in this class. And then if we want to, we talk about Anthony Richardson, who I think is worth a home run swing, but we'll talk about him in a sec.
Okay.
And you're bringing up the athletic stuff. Stroud, the Georgia game and the Michigan game where he created and scrambled a little bit. There was also the Northwestern game that was played in gale force winds, 6 mile-an-hour winds.
Yeah.
And he got used as a design runner there, zone reads, and he was good at it. And that is the thing, is there's a difference between can't do it and the offense won't call it. There's big difference. So the fact that he has that in his bag, I'm not saying he's a fantastic athlete, but I'll say he's a good athlete. I think he's more of a complete package to me, on top of what I think is he's tough and has a good mental side to him in this class. Anyways.
So what you're saying, and Nate Tice, before we let you go from The Athletic, what you're saying is if you're going to take a swing on somebody, it would be Anthony Richardson?
Yeah. My job's not on the line saying that, but
fair enough.
You're betting on traits, and I think he does the quarterback stuff way better than he's been given credit for.
Okay.
And I don't think the accuracy stuff, I'm not concerned about because they
Josh Allen broke the accuracy thing.
Yeah, but also when the offense asks you to throw the ball 20 yards down the field every single snap, it's going to be hard to have a high completion percentage. Like these other guys get lifted up with some bubbles and gimmies. But I think Richardson's just a freak and has more to the mental and quarterback side than he's been given credit for.
Nate Tice, The Athletic, man, appreciate that. Great stuff, as always. Hopefully we can talk to you again before we get to the draft.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.